Hi everyone, Shrimp here. Once again giving you some coverage of the Houston Regional Qualifier. There's going to be two matches. First of all, round 2 between Prismatic Ismism and Nalpaz, and also the round 3 match between Ali Eldrazi and Litten Lover 91. These were so much fun to cast. I think it was real mastery of Kaiser and Misfortune, and very fast matches, but a lot of great strategic thinking and just how to sort of get there against the odds and really make the most of what your deck offers you and what's provided. So really have a lot of fun with this. My notes for what I'm trying to improve in this video are going to be down below in the description, so just to note sort of what I'm trying to change from my previous cast. And if you have any feedback for me or any suggestions on how I can improve or what I can do next, please let me know in the comments. Have fun. Here we're moving into round 2 of our Houston Regional Qualifier. It's going to be Prismatic Ismism versus Nalpaz and Teemo against Kaiser. Now Teemo has to be one of the most fun legends of Origins. It's just a very different playstyle, focusing a lot around those hidden cards, and being blue-purple, it has access to a lot of the really strong cards that have made Annie and Kaiser extremely strong in this meta, with Teemo being able to access Flash and Smokescreen, Fight or Flight, and just a bunch of other really annoying options for your opponent when you're trying to either get rid of his cards or establish a strong presence for yourself on the board. Now, Teemo really revolves around 2 major cards to get that power, to get those points, and he really wants to be holding battlefields. And to do that, he plays Ember Monk, which is going to be getting that +2 might every time he reveals a hidden card, and there should be a lot of hidden cards. If he's on a battlefield, you can guarantee at least 1 or 2 are going to be seen there. And later then, building into that Dr. Mundo. So Teemo really doesn't mind spending these early resources like this Gust to deny the Legion Rearguard scoring an early point, and that delay is going to be very important because, of course, the more discard cards that Ismism has, the stronger that Dr. Mundo is going to be later on in the game. But Nalpaz piling on a lot of early pressure there, developing a Noxus Hopeful and a Watchful Sentry already on turn 2, despite that Legion Rearguard going back into hand. And of all the cards that you can return to hand, Legion Rearguard has that option to accelerate, so it's not as damning as it otherwise could be. It hurts a lot more when this Watchful Sentry gets sent back to hand, because then it becomes sort of a dead hand. You don't really want to play that later into the game, or it feels a lot worse to do so. So Nalpaz, obviously recognizing the threat of Gust early game does exist, playing out that Rearguard so that he will be able to develop some strong tempo later on and get this Watchful Sentry actually onto the board and hopefully benefit from that Death Knell effect. But Ismism going to be getting that early point, that first point onto the board, playing out an Ember Monk straight away and also a hidden card. So that game plan already working out for him. And now it's up to Nalpaz to navigate through this, because that battlefield is going to be extremely challenging to take. Even if you want to try and use a Void Seeker or something to remove this Ember Monk, Ism still has the option to just reveal that hidden card and make the Ember Monk 6 might straight away. It doesn't have to be in a combat that he reveals this hidden card. You see Nalpaz visibly frustrated with the concept of that. It is a very strong battlefield hold developed already. Speaking of battlefields, let's take a look at these. We've spoken at length already about Zone Warrens and how useful that is for cycling through your deck, especially when you have something like a Traveling Merchant. It's really useful for finding those key core cards that you need to win the game as it develops. And Nalpaz is also playing a card that has established itself as a very powerful and frustrating card in the meta, which is Reaver's Row. And this has really enabled Kaiser to be extremely annoying and extremely sticky, because Kaiser's chosen champion, Kaiser Survivor, is able to draw a card every time she conquers, and with Reaver's Row allowing you to withdraw as a defender, it makes it very difficult to get rid of this card, and so it ends up being such a valuable card and developing so much additional card draw with the inability to take it out from because of Reaver's Row. It just really lets Kaiser find those useful cards and find more answers like this. And Nalpaz committing a lot to the board here, sending in that Noxus Hopeful into the Zone Warrens, playing out the Assault. Ismism revealing that he had a Teemo Scout there, which gains 3 power when he's revealed. And then Nalpaz playing out this Smokescreen to reduce the Ember Monk, which had raised its might by 2, lowering it by 4 with the Smokescreen, so that the Ember Monk is down to 2 might. And Ismism has to make a decision here. Yeah, it's just going to end up withdrawing everything, and Nalkpass is able to take that battlefield, deciding that, hey, all of these cards, the expenditure that I have to make here is worth it, because if Teemo is able to hold this battlefield, it's only going to get more and more difficult from here to hold it, especially if Ismism decides to pick up a Teemo again. Once he's revealed it, he has that option to pick a Teemo back up into his hand, and that can be a slippery slope if you let this Teemo become reusable. So Nalkpass scoring 2 points, moving his Watchful Sentry into Reaver's Row, and most likely this Watchful Sentry won't be removed from the battlefield. He's going to hope that he can hold this battlefield to get that extra point, and will be expecting to maybe get up to 4 points on his next turn. And if this sentry does go down, then so be it. You get to draw another card, and it's really not the end of the world. Now, Ismism does have options, of course, if he wants to deny this hold and deny the acceleration that Kai'Sa has really got here, because Kai'Sa getting to 4 points this early is a risky proposition. So playing out something like a Singularity, that could be something that's an option here if he's running it in the deck. Teemos have a lot of options. Typically they like to play around unit removal and using the gusts to force things off, the fight or flights to force things out, and so not everybody is running this Singularity, though it is a blue option. Opting for the Stupefy for now, just to be able to draw a card, playing out the Ember Monk and preparing for the next turn, though of course Ember Monk is not going to be able to gain any power already because it's impossible to play a hidden card. So this Ember Monk is at risk of one of the many options that Kai'Sa has. You know, it's 2 of 3 Ember Monks already. It is one of the core cards for transitioning through this mid-game. So if Nalkpass has something like a Falling Star in hand, it could be committed early just to try and deny this. And yeah, Nalkpass, as we see there, playing in the Kai'Sa Survivor onto Reaver's Row, it should be fairly safe there. And the Watchful Sentry being removed back to base. Noxus Hopeful still holding the battlefield, so Nalkpass already up to 4. Looking at getting up to 6 here, with the Ember Monk, as it stands, would either trade with the Zorn Warrens or push Kai'Sa out to bring Nalkpass up to 2. Ismism up to 2, sorry. Unless he has something else that he wants to do here. Now, of course, Thousand-Tailed Watcher is an option that is very powerful to push people off of this battlefield, though whether you want to develop it this early into the game is a question, especially when Kai'Sa is just going to retreat. That's the kind of card you would normally want to remove here. But Ismism just going to be searching through this deck with the stacked deck, trying to find an answer, trying to find a viable attack strategy that will enable him to get back control of these battlefields, develop those hidden cards, and put him in a very strong position to potentially take game 1. But this Ember Monk, as it stands by itself here, would only be able to trade, and you really don't want to have to leave this in base here and just develop extra units, because if Kai'Sa is able to hold both of those battlefields and move up to 6, it is a precarious situation. Yeah, and that Singularity is indeed going to come out here, most likely denying this Kai'Sa and the Noxus Hopeful, removing both battlefields, and just ensuring that Ismism can move into a battlefield and get control and hopefully play something hidden there. And just reacting before the Singularity goes through, Nalkpass just going to be playing out a Stupefy onto the opposing Ember Monk to try and draw a card, maybe find a retreat, something that can keep this Kai'Sa alive, keep her on the board. Playing in another Stupefy on the reaction, just trying to exhaust all options, but eventually finds that he has none, and that Kai'Sa is going to have to go into the discard pile. And that is something that hurts. That is a big momentum swing for Ismism, who is going to be able to take this battlefield and move in. Now let's talk a little bit about the options that Teemo has when moving into a battlefield, but actually that won't matter because Nalkpass is playing out a Hextech Ray, and with the Stupefy already affecting this Ember Monk, he was only on 3 might, and that Hextech Ray is going to be enough to take it out and prevent that battlefield from being taken. The open showdown state having not resolved yet, Nalkpass gaining focus and being able to take it out, prevent that take, prevent any hidden cards from coming down, which really devastating for a Teemo player. You really need to be able to get onto the board. You really need to be able to hold the battlefield, play out hidden cards, gain your strength that way. But still, a lot of discarded cards on the side of Ismism. And let's not forget, blue-purple combination. He could get Ride the Wind here. Playing out a Dr. Mundo and Ride the Wind to take a battlefield is exactly the kind of thing that Ismism is going to be hoping to see. Nagpass has to be aware of that, but he moves this Watchful Sentry into Zorn Warrens, gonna get some additional card draw here, discarding that Ravenbloom Student. And it's very interesting with the Kai'Sa, they tend to run 6 or up to 9 2-drops, so there's always something to discard, there's always something to develop onto the board. And with the amount of removal that Kai'Sa has, the amount of efficiency, being able to boost these 2-drops with something like a Cleave, affect your opponent with something like a Stupefy or a Smokescreen, these are extremely powerful options and turning very cheap cards into, well, developed board, essentially. Something that can really hold tempo on your side. And Nagpass really not letting go from the very first turn, committing a lot of resources to deny Ismism, and it's absolutely paying off here. You can see that he's had full control of the battlefield. The score's 5-1. 2 units developed for Nagpass, and absolutely nothing on the side of Ismism, who hasn't been able to get anything to stick for more than a single turn. And you can see that it is beginning to show. Once again, Ismism having to use this stacked deck, having to try and find an answer. Because, once again, Nagpass, if he's able to hold this battlefield, he does have a hidden card. He is threatening that 6th point. And 6 points for Kai'Sa is the turning point. It is the moment when you're able to double conquer and win the game straight away. And Ismism able to find the Dr. Mundo, able to develop it. It's going to be a very strong, beefy unit. Of course, at the start of his next turn, he's going to have to recycle 3 of those discarded cards, so Dr. Mundo is going to get slightly weaker, but hoping that it's going to be still strong enough to challenge this Kai'Sa. And Kai'Sa not known for meaty, beefy units, so Dr. Mundo should be very strong. It should be hard to remove Dr. Mundo, of course, for Kai'Sa. Her removal options typically revolve around smaller units. 4 damage to 6 damage, something like a Cathian Rain could be used, of course, to take out a 12 might Dr. Mundo, though let's not expect that to happen here. And Dr. Mundo going to be adding 10 might onto himself, so going to be up to 16 there already. And of course, that hidden card from Nagpass just being a Consult the Past, allowing him to find more options, draw some more cards. And he is on 6 here, moving into the other battlefield. Ismism, of course, completely tapped, unable to say anything about that. So it's going to be 7 points for Nagpass. And this Dr. Mundo is going to have to be Ride the Wind here. It is going to have to be Mundo using his natural movement to move into one of these battlefields and take it away from Nagpass. And then using Ride the Wind to pull Mundo back, readying him again so that he can move into the other battlefield and double conquer, because it's going to have to be a double to deny the hold. But as we were talking about there, Nagpass having the Acathian Rain and the Falling Star, heavy resource commitment, but with all the card draw that Kai'Sa has had, that is a massive amount of damage coming down. 18 damage onto this Dr. Mundo, and he's not going to be able to weather that. Is immediately removed. So Ismism just unable to get a unit to stick here, and having to use the Sprite Call just to be able to challenge the battlefield and deny the immediate win for Nagpass, who is on 7. But if he's unable to force this Yordle off, it's going to have to be something like a Gust or a Ride the Wind at best, just to force Nagpass to double conquer once again, because if that Lecturing Yordle just simply returns to the Reaver's Row, it will only enable Nagpass to draw a card. He won't be able to win just with the Lecturing Yordle. Of course, Nagpass has a lot of options. He could be running that Darius and Cleave combination, that 2 cards that always enable you to get back onto the ready your Darius and get onto a battlefield immediately, but Nagpass will only just have enough runes to make it happen. And another sprite call being found by Ismism here, so he will be able to push into that second battlefield and push the Lecturing Yordle off. Now these are temporary, so Nalkpass doesn't have to overcommit here. He can simply wait until he returns, until these two time out at the start of Ismism's turn. Nalkpass, however, does have an option. He does have the Hextech Ray to deny this contest, and that will allow him to hold the battlefield for the next turn. And that is going to be game 1, going over to Nalkpass. And we'll be back in just a moment with game 2. Moving into game 2 between Prismatic Ismism and Nalkpass. Ism going to be hoping that he can keep something developed on the board for longer than one turn this time, and starting out as he did last game with the Traveling Merchant. And as expected here, I think everyone was expecting the Bandle Tree to come out. Possibly some surprise that it wasn't the starting battlefield that he went with, but Bandle Tree, of course, allowing him to hide 2 hidden cards at that battlefield at the same time. So, of course, he wants to get control of that early. Nalkpass will be eager to deny that. His battlefield, of course, being the Void Gate, which means that any spell damage will be increased by 1 as long as it's being used at that battlefield. Nalkpass developing his Watchful Sentry on turn 1, and Prismatic Ismism just developing a second card here, placing a hidden card from hand onto the battlefield, and placing Teemo, Scout, from his champion zone into the battlefield, hidden straight away, just to make sure that he can keep hold of that early on. And a Seal of Rage being used by Nalkpass here. Very interesting tech into the Kai'Sa, not something we see too often, but it does enable this turn 2 Darius to come out. And immediately that Darius, up to 7 might, is able to deny the hold from Ismism. So once again, just unable to get this battlefield to stick, really struggling to stay there. Unfortunately, his other hidden card was that Consult the Past, so he does reveal that and draw the cards first. But really unfortunate, and an incredible combination for Nalkpass to have here. Possibly this Seal of Rage was something included within the sideboard, ready for situations like this. And usually we expect the Darius to be combined with Cleave, so we don't normally expect to see that before turn 3 at the very earliest, but this Seal, a very strong enabler and something that Ismism couldn't have been prepared for, really expecting that being able to place those 2 hidden cards would be enough to at least deter Nalkpass from moving in there, but not the case. Nalkpass on 2 points to Ismism's 1, and that stack deck once again coming through. Ismism really hoping that he can find some early stability here, something like an Ember Monk, but developing early into Kai'Sa is extremely risky with that Falling Star, an ever-present threat, able to threaten the units even in your base. And you can see a difficult decision here for Ismism, who might be choosing between something like a Sprite Mother or Sprite Call, Dr. Mundo, and Thousand-Tailed Watcher, which normally Teemo is also running into this deck, so could be difficult choices here. And it's always the challenging thing when you're running stack deck, is what if you pull 2 or more really useful core cards? 2 of those are going to be returning to the bottom of your main deck, and that makes it extremely difficult going into the rest of the game if you have to get rid of those core cards. Of course, Thousand-Tailed Watcher is so important for retaking battlefields. But he seems to have made his choice, playing out that Sprite Mother. So he's going to be getting some early presence here, hopefully able to push straight into the Darius, which is at only 5 might right now. Now, Nalkpass is completely tapped. Isn't going to be able to prevent this from going down, so Darius will be moving into the discard. And the Ravenbloom Student also moving into the discard, and this temporary Sprite will be holding the battlefield for Ismism, and that's going to be enough for him, who is able to get a hidden card down. And that could, of course, be another Teemo or a Teemo strategist that will be able to hold the battlefield after the Sprite is recalled at his beginning phase. Nalkpass, of course, does have the option of this Kai'Sa Survivor, who can take that battlefield if it is not, in fact, a Teemo. It could be possible that this is just another Consult the Past, or even simply a Fight or Flight, which would only deny the battlefield being taken, and Kai'Sa would still be able to survive into the base. And he is going to check this. He is just going to face check it, see what it is. It is a Consult the Past, calls Izmism's bluff, and he is going to be able to take this battlefield back. The sprite being removed from the board, bringing Nalgpass up to a 4th point, as the Watchful Sentry was able to hold the Void Gate. And that's what's so frustrating against playing against a Kai'Sa, is that they can remove your units from the board, and in a single turn, they don't necessarily need to develop. They have so many ways of bringing in a unit that will immediately be able to act, immediately be able to challenge you on these battlefields, and instantly take control. Meaning that those points, they rack up extremely fast. Izmism back against the wall once again. He still has this Sprite Mother. He's not out of the game yet. If he can take control of a battlefield, if he can find a Dr. Mundo, he is close to being able to play it, but he's still going to have to wait another turn until he's going to be able to play it out. And Sprite Mother is going to go onto the board, but Nalgpass still had runes up, still has that removal. Kai'Sa proving once again that very difficult to hold a battlefield. And for Izmism, the challenge is even to take the battlefield, but smart play, making sure that he plays the Sprite Mother in there before he plays any cards of his own, and he has a backup Sprite Mother, so he plays another one. Those sprites are going to move in. With the addition of the Sprite Call, 2 sprites will take care of this Kai'Sa. She is going to go down, and that is frustrating loss for Nalgpass, who's now lost 1 Darius and 1 Kai'Sa immediately on the next turn, but his situation is not exactly dire. This Watchful Sentry is still up. He'll be able to move this back into the Void Gate if he wants to. The Sprite, again, has temporary, only has that 3 might, so a very realistic chance that Nalgpass is going to have options to remove it once again. And the Sprite Mother herself, still developed in base. A lot to think about moving into this turn, and on that next turn, Dr. Mundo will be able to come out if Izmism has it. But there's always that risk of developing a Mundo without being able to move and without being able to make use of that large unit. That once again, Nalgpass, the Kai'Sa, just has removal options. That Acathian Rain, such a huge amount of damage, and combining that with many of the other cheap options that Kai'Sa has, it makes it very, very difficult for your large units to stick on the board. But Nalgpass just developing a Watchful Sentry and a Noxus Hopeful for now, keeping 4 runes up, meaning that he could have removal to prevent Izmism from moving into these battlefields again, and Izmism knows it. He knows that it's not going to be easy to walk into these battlefields, and he has to really consider how he plays this out, what the turn order is. Does he use the Sprite Mother simply as bait to draw out this removal, or does he play something onto the board first? Looks like he's playing with his options, toying with the idea of putting something down straight away, thinking about that Ember Monk that I'm sure he wants to get onto the board. And if he's able to get onto the Bandle Tree, for example, he could be able to play that straight on there, but Nalgpass, 4 runes up, that's for a reason. Kai'Sa never out of options. Izmism eventually deciding he is going to play these 4 runes to get the Ember Monk onto the board, and also play out a Traveling Merchant and a Tidecaller face up, just deciding we need to develop this board now. And knowing that Nalgpass, if he wants to remove this board, it will have to be an Acathian Rain, and it will cost all of his runes. And we did see there with the top deck that Nalgpass has the Acathian Rain. He's going to move into this second battlefield. That does bring him up to 7, and he could simply choose to remove this entire board from Izmism, and that is exactly what's going to happen. Acathian Rain off the top, and that choice to develop everything from Izmism totally backfiring, unfortunately. Not able to move into a battlefield, not able to prevent Nalgpass from moving up to 7, and losing everything in the process. Izmism has one option now. It has to be this stack deck. It has to be Ride the Wind. It has to be Gust. It has to be something to deny both battlefields, because a single hold will be enough for Nalkpass to take not just this game, but the series. A Lecturing Yordle coming out, able to draw a card, and just not able to find options. And so Kai'Sa will take this 2-0 against Prismatic Ismism. Welcome now to our round 3 matches. It's going to be our 2-0 competitors, Ali Eldrazi versus Litten Lover 91. Ali on the Misfortune and Litten on Annie. Misfortune almost certainly here is going to be Dazzling Aurora once again, as usual. If someone is playing orange body domain, you have to expect that Dazzling Aurora is going to be there. And here we are with Misfortune. I really love this color combination of purple and orange. I think it gives you really good options both early on in the game and later. Of course, usually you want to stall out the game as long as possible so that you can get to Dazzling Aurora being a factor. And even if Dazzling Aurora doesn't come out, you still have these large units that are very powerful, very useful, and I think the Misfortune, having access to Mindsplitter, which can really mess up your opponent's game plan, a well-timed one can remove a key combo piece, and with something like Annie, you would expect that Vi Ride the Wind combo is going to be something he'll hope to disrupt later on. But also the Soul Gorger, which can bring back a unit from the battlefield, meaning that those Deadbloom Predators, those Mindsplitters can have extra utility, and they're such large might that it is so difficult to deal with them. After you've already used so many resources to get rid of them the first time, can you do it again? So Litten Lover, going to be starting off the game by developing this Traveling Merchant, and Ali will be hoping that he can either get some ramp from Immobilize, or maybe just wait to find a Catalyst of Aeons on the next turn, but looking like he's unable to play something this turn. That doesn't mean he's out of options. Remember, he has access to things like Gust and Fight or Flight, which means that even if Litten Lover wants to move in and take these battlefields, he has Denial, and stalling out those early points, denying decks like Kai'Sa and Annie the ability to rack up points early and put you in a threatening position by turn 4, turn 5, is going to be key. So Ali does have the option to respond here, that movement trigger meaning that Litten Lover is doing her discard and move from the Traveling Merchant moving, but it is an open showdown state, meaning that Ali can react to this and does indeed use a Gust to deny that point, forcing that Traveling Merchant back into hand. And this is something that can be really inopportune if you're playing Kai'Sa or Annie. Having to redevelop these cheap units can be devastating. You don't really want to have to pay the cost to play them again. You want to be playing along that mana curve. You want to be developing up towards bigger threats like Kai'Sa and eventually Darius. So having to develop a Traveling Merchant 2 or even 3 times can be very annoying. Litten Lover playing a sneaky deckhand onto the same battlefield, and Ali once again having the answer, having a Fight or Flight, saying, nope, absolutely you are not going to take points already in this game. So sneaky deckhand, even though she can be played straight onto a battlefield that's open, unable to secure a point here. So Ali moving up to 5. It's unlikely that he's going to have any units to play at this point, but he'll be hoping for a Catalyst of Aeons, and with 4 runes being expended, it does seem like the Catalyst of Aeons is there, so the ramp has begun. The clock has begun to tick down towards that Dazzling Aurora, towards these large, powerful units, and he already has 7 runes on the table. It will be 9 next turn. It could be a Dazzling Aurora, and if it's not, that means that pretty much every threat he has available to him is in cost range. But Litten, this time, will move that sneaky deckhand onto the Zorn Warrens. With only 1 rune available from Ali, it seems like he does not have a second Gust just yet. So from Conquering, Litten is going to discard and draw, and he's then going to draw 2 cards because of this Scrap Heap, which is absolutely beautiful. It's always a dream when you're able to discard that card. It's just free card draw. And we'll now be able to develop something else. It is going to be a Kai'Sa Survivor, which does come in accelerated, enabling Litten to push for that second point as well. It is, of course, risky moving the Kai'Sa straight onto that battlefield, because even though you do get this second point, it can be worth just developing the Kai'Sa into your base and not accelerating her, knowing that next turn Ali does have enough runes to play something like a Deadbloom Predator, which can be played straight onto a battlefield that your opponent controls. So if he does play a Deadbloom Predator here, it's very likely he'd want to take out that Kaiser, and Kaiser is something that you normally want to preserve when you're playing the Kaiser Legend or Annie, as Kaiser Survivor is able to draw a card every time she conquers, so it's great for enabling you to find those core options, those core pieces that push you over the line, that enable you to remove your opponent's board options. And having it removed straight away is something that your opponents very much want to do. And it does look like a Deadbloom Predator is coming in here with those 2 orange runes being recycled. And it is going to challenge Kaiser straight away. Now, Little Lover, thanks to that Annie Darkchild passive, is able to ready 2 runes at the end of her turn. So does have options here. Could play something like a Void Seeker to at least trade this out. Could play something like a Flash, although that wouldn't be ideal to draw this sneaky deckhand back to base again as well. Though again, developing your base isn't exactly unwanted. And it's going to be Ride the Wind that Little Lover uses instead, and that's got to hurt a little bit. Ride the Wind is something you typically want to keep until the end of the game, where you can use it on Vi, rack up your trash and recycle to give Vi a massive power boost, might boost, and then move on to both battlefields and take them both in the same turn, or at least take one. But having to use it here to preserve the Kaiser, which you definitely don't want to go down this early when you developed it on your second turn. A necessary cost here. It is possible that Lytton still has a second Ride the Wind, so that may be why they were more than willing to just straight up use this Ride the Wind to save the Kaiser, instead of going for a trade using the Void Seekers. But a Vain Hunter is what's going to be coming down here. This is a card I like very much. I really like this play. I think the Vain Hunter is something that's sort of an underrated card. If your opponent is in control of a battlefield, you are able to play her readied, and she comes in with Assault 3, so she can attack that battlefield and bring a lot of power from hand. And alongside the Kaiser, they are going to be able to challenge this Deadbloom Predator. And Ali won't have much to say about it, with only 1 rune up. Is going to lose this Deadbloom Predator, but is going to take out the Kaiser Survivor, denying that deck cycling and just leaving the Vayne up. Now, Little Lover does have 1 rune available, so she could pull Vayne back into hand, as once Vayne conquers a battlefield, she is able to be returned for 1 rune cost, and it doesn't affect Annie too much. Annie, as we already know, does ready 2 runes at the end of the turn, so would still have options available, but elects not to. I would say this is somewhat of a risk, as Ali could very easily have a second Deadbloom Predator, still has more than enough runes to play one, or even a Soul Gorger to bring that very same Deadbloom Predator back from the discard pile and play it straight back onto the battlefield to deny one of these. And we'll see what he wants to do here. If he has either of those options in hand, he does have 8 runes up and available, so both are totally viable. And Lytton, with only 3 runes left total, thanks to Sigil of the Storm, both times that she's gone in to conquer that, she's had to recycle a rune. She's had to get rid of some of those, so she's not ramped up as much as she would like to be, going for a very aggressive strategy, trying to get points early, trying to end this game before Ali is really able to establish himself on the board. But this is a Soul Gorger coming out from Ali's hand, and that means that Deadbloom Predator is coming back. It is going onto one of these battlefields, and Ali, even though he also has to recycle some runes here to make it happen, not unwilling to do so, knowing that Little Lover is also very few on runes, so not losing as much tempo as you normally would with these 2 big cost units back to back. Really able to keep the game closely contested. And with only 3 runes up, Little Lover not able to pull out something to deny this Deadbloom Predator. No fight or flight up and available. No damage enough to close this gap of 8-3. So Sneaky Deckhand simply moving into the trash, and Ali able to take that battlefield. Now recycling another rune to be able to play a hidden card. You have to imagine that that's going to be a fight or flight here, just to make sure that even if Little Lover is able to develop another card and try and push some sort of presence into this base, that he'll still be able to hold. Really just ensuring that he gets that third point and keeps the point difference close. Vayne, of course, holding onto the Sigil of the Storm battlefield does bring Little Lover's points up to 5, meaning that she only wants one more point to put her in that lethal range of 6 points. And a Vi plus Ride the Wind combo would be enough to do the damage. But Little Lover here developing the Traveling Merchant, moving Vayne back into base, just ensuring that she keeps tempo on her side, doesn't put that Vayne at risk on the next turn, and just developing as many units as she can into the base so that she can challenge onto these battlefields next turn to push her onto that crucial 6th point and passing the turn. But this does mean that Ali is in a rather strong position. 2 strong units developed, a fight or flight, most likely the hidden card that is played there with the Deadbloom Predator. It is a shaky position on both sides, you have to say, with Ali really dancing around these points that Little Lover has managed to amass in the early game, playing very aggressively, but Little Lover herself really staring down a timer of strong, powerful units. Now, Dazzling Aurora seemingly not going to be a factor in this game, at least for now, with the runes almost completely reset on both sides, but this invert timelines going to be giving Ali the ability to discard his hand and then draw 4, which is great for him. Only had 2 cards in hand previous to that, and Little Lover is going to have to discard that massive hand that she had and only bring herself back up to 4. Although it looks like she's drawn 5 here. Let's see if the judge notices that and calls it out. I'm sure it wasn't intentional, but it is something that should be checked there. Yeah, that's definitely 5 cards. And Ali going to be moving the Soul Gorger onto the Zorn Warren's battlefield, just ensuring that he's going to hold that, even if Little Lover has some tricks up their sleeve. Just doing as much as possible to make sure that they don't lose this battlefield. He needs to keep these points close. He doesn't want Little Lover to move up to that crucial 6th point. And the thing about moving both of these units onto the same battlefield is, normally you would think, hey, why wouldn't you go and take that second battlefield and hold it there? Of course, having both units on one battlefield is extremely useful because it gives you that extra power to hold it, especially against the threat when something like this fight or flight comes down. And you can of course have things like their own Void Seekers and also Cleave. But if you're able to preserve presence on this battlefield with either or both of those units, Misfortune Legend can give a unit ganking, which means that you can just move from battlefield to battlefield. So holding a single battlefield with strong units is more than viable on Misfortune. But Little Lover fight or flighting this Deadbloom Predator back to base, giving her the best chance of taking over this battlefield against just the 5 Might Soul Gorger, sending in units one at a time. It's going to be Vayne moving in with that immediate +3 assault, which would have been 5-5, forcing Ali to use the hidden fight or flight to push Vayne back to base, pushing these Traveling Merchants in, and before taking an action, carrying out that movement trigger, discarding 2 cards to draw 2 cards and hopefully find an option, discarding a flash, which is useful information for Ali, but we'll come back to that later, as Little Lover plays out this cleave, meaning that just 1 Traveling Merchant is 5 mites, so Soul Gorger will be able to trade with one of them, but won't be able to deny this entire assault. And of course with Ali, no runes left up, won't be able to entirely repel the attack. And Litten will be able to take this battlefield, pushing her up to 6. Now, very interesting that on the Traveling Merchant movement trigger, chose to discard the Flash. Flash is a very valuable card for reactive, keeping your units alive, especially when large threats come out, such as Deadbloom Predator. It's very useful to have those flashes to preserve your board, preserve your development, and keep your tempo at a high level. but Ali probably able to intuit there is a second flash in hand. However, on conquering the battlefield, Little Lover elected to discard a second flash, and that does pull things into question. Little Lover deciding that they need aggressive options rather than reactive flashes to keep you alive. And so electing to get rid of that second flash, using a stacked deck, and even though that invert timelines definitely bought Ali some time, Litten's hand is growing once again from those many cards expended to get to this point, still with a strong card pool in hand. And on 6 points, that's when Ali has to think, does she have Vi plus Ride the Wind to push this game over the edge and conquer both battlefields? Now, Ali does have 7 runes, unless there's one stacked. It's a little bit difficult to tell with these sleeves. There may be an 8th rune there, but I believe 7 runes, pushing in this Dead Bloom Predator onto the Zorn Warrens to compete with this Dead Bloom Predator. But Little Lover has another Fight or Flight, but Ali, with all of these runes available, could choose to develop this Captain Misfortune, which he does. She comes in accelerated, and that means that when Captain Misfortune moves, it will ready Dead Bloom Predator once again, so he still has the option to double conquer a battlefield here if Litten doesn't have any more denial. Now, that is 2 Fight or Flights, a third one. Not all Annie players run 3 Fight or Flights, and it's very unlikely that she has a third one here, so he's playing on that gambit. Little Lover using a stacked deck, most likely looking to try and find that third and final Fight or Flight if she is running it. Let's see if she did, but otherwise Misfortune Captain will take this Zorn Warrens and enable Ali to cycle his deck a little more with the conquer condition of discarding and drawing a card. Doesn't look like she found a Fight or Flight, but let's remember, Litten is also looking for something else. Little Lover wants to find that Vi plus Fight or Flight combo to double conquer these battlefields in one single turn. She has a massive pile of discarded cards right now, and that would enable her to put massive amounts of power onto the Vi. Ali himself has used 2 Fight or Flights, so it is the question, does he have a third Fight or Flight to deny a Vi from double conquering a battlefield? And Ali deciding to develop this Dead Bloom Predator onto the Zorn Warrens, make sure that he has a strong hold there, so that if Little Lover has that Vi Fight or Flight, or even something like a Darius plus Cleave combo, she shouldn't be able to double conquer this turn. Darius plus Cleave would not give him enough power to take that battlefield. It would raise him only to 10, so Little Lover would have to commit both Vayne and Darius with the Cleave just to push them off this battlefield, would lose the Darius and only the Vayne would remain. But Little Lover just pushing Vayne onto Sigil of the Storm. Ali just looking at his options. With only 1 rune up and available, though Vayne has 2 might, remember that she is assaulting, even if there are no units there, she is still assaulting this battlefield, so technically her might is at 5 currently, so it isn't possible to play this Gust. And it looks like Ali is just double checking that to make sure that indeed he can't, so we can probably intuit that he does have a Gust in hand here. It is something he will be able to use on his next turn when Vayne is a defender, which could be crucial in making sure that Litten isn't able to hold that battlefield. And yeah, Little Lover moving up to 7 points as Ali concedes that he's unable to stop this. But let's not forget these 2 strong units. If they are not pushed off of this battlefield, one can be given ganking and can conquer that second battlefield. Ali will move up to 5 points if he holds this battlefield next turn, and Little Lover just develops the Paltiporo, just make sure that she gets a stronger board presence to threaten later on in the game. But 7 points is not really where you want to be for Annie. Annie definitely wants to pull out the double conquer, because as long as your opponent is holding 1, it can be difficult to push them off of that second one, and if you're only conquering 1 battlefield per turn, does mean that you're only drawing a card and you're not winning the game from doing that. And Ali has the simple option of ganking over to that other battlefield if he wants to. May also have his own Ride the Winds. There's a lot of options that he could have here. But does indeed use the Gust that we assumed he had from his little peek at the Vayne card, so Vayne will be returning to Litten Lover's hand. And that is interesting because it means that now Litten Lover can't use the Vayne to assault and the Darius in the same turn. Simply doesn't have enough runes to do it. Only has 6 runes currently because of that Sigil of the Storm, because of how much it has cost her to get to this point, playing so aggressively. Will only be able to play either Vayne or that Darius combo. But if she has Vi, Ride the Wind, that would be enough. Now, after playing Gust, Ali has 6 more runes to play with, so most likely won't be able to pull up any large units here. Plays a Mindsplitter. It's possible that rune we just saw get recycled was floating the rune and wasn't paying for the fight or flight. Indeed, that definitely is the case because, of course, as we know, Gust does not have a power cost. I can't recall right now if he exhausted the rune just now or if it was already exhausted. Either way, he would need to exhaust another rune here. However, Fight or Flight is going to remove that Vi. Sorry, that Mindsplitter is going to deny that Vi from Litten Lover's hand. Just saying, hey, Darius, your 2 Dariuses in Cleave, while they're nice, they're not enough to double conquer this battlefield, so you need to have Ride the Wind and Vi. I know you've already used 1 Ride the Wind, so I'm going to remove this Vi. You're going to have a card draw on your next turn. You don't have any additional card draw in your hand, so you don't have the combo. You don't have the means to push me off of both battlefields, and I am at 6. If you don't push me off of one of these, I win next turn, and even if you do, I can make a unit gank to take that other battlefield. So play this Darius Cleave. That will bring Darius up to 10. He can conquer the Sigil of the Storm. However, a Litten Lover probably doesn't have a spell option to use those additional runes that she'll channel at the end of the turn. And a gank should be enough to close this out for Ali. Indeed, Darius Cleave does come out readying Darius, giving him that additional 2 might and giving him 3 might for assaulting with the Cleave. He is able to conquer that Sigil of the Storm, but Litten Lover will only draw a card from this. Will not be able to play Vi and Ride the Wind this turn. Will still have to be banking on it for next turn. May hope to just draw some smaller unit to be able to defend this battlefield, indeed moving the Pauti Poro there to try and put as much might down as possible. We don't know if she found a 3rd Fight or Flight either, but Ali here will be able to make that Deadbloom Predator ganking and could simply take the game right here. Holds for his 7th point. May have his own 3rd Fight or Flight to push this Darius back and make it all the easier. He is using stack deck just to try and improve the odds to make it as likely as possible. We see there that he does have a Ride the Wind and a Gust. The Gust could push the Pauti Poro into the base. Looks like he's choosing to use it there. We do see a rune exhausted. And I was just selecting the card to hand. A little bit of a visual error from myself. But that Misfortune Legend is being used to give the Deadbloom Predator ganking. Moving it over to Sigil of the Storm. That Darius, only at 5 might now, doesn't carry over that buff into the next turn. So it is 8 might to 7. Litten Lover has to have an answer here. Seems like she does not have the answer, and that is going to be game 1, going over to Ali Eldrazi, making it 1-0 in this Misfortune versus Ali matchup. Moving now into game 2 between Ali and Litten Lover. A fantastic game 1 coming in from Ali. A lot of delay and stalling and denial to really force Litten Lover into a hard corner. And then eventually coming out with a perfectly timed Mindsplitter to really deny any chance of Litten Lover to close that out, knowing exactly what she had in hand and exactly what he had to play around to be able to close that game out. And really just a beautiful use of Misfortune Captain, knowing that you can use that power to ready a rune that you've already exhausted. It's not limited to units. Using it in both ways, both cases, and just playing out a very smooth, very clean game 1. Now Litten Lover with a very familiar start to game 2, playing out the Traveling Merchant, and on turn 1 also being able to play out this sneaky deckhand onto the Arena's Greatest. Thanks to the Obelisk of Power, which Ali is playing, the battlefield enables you to channel an additional rune at the start of your first turn. And similarly for Litten Lover, Arena's Greatest, which allows you to get a point at the start of your beginning phase on turn 1. So Litten Lover already up to 3, having double conquered there. And already, maybe the clock is ticking for Ali here. He's going to be feeling the pressure. Didn't find Dazzling Roar in game 1. Maybe looking to do better this time. Already up to 8 runes, having elected to go first thanks to that Catalyst of Aeons. Won't be able to play it this turn, but perhaps if he has a Deadbloom Predator, he will be able to shut down some of this early pressure coming out from Litten. And it looks like a lot of runes being channeled already. It does look like the full 8. Is it the Deadbloom Predator? Yes, it is. Playing it onto the Obelisk of Power. And hoping that Litten Lover doesn't have that Fight or Flight, but unfortunately she does. Thanks to those additional rune channels from Annie Darkchild, able to push out the Deadbloom Predator and prevent it from getting full use of its amazing passive. So Litten Lover holding these battlefields, going up to 5 already. Really getting the maximum use out of the Arena's Greatest. And Ali got to really be considering all of his options here. May need a Gust to really get him out of this. Had to spend all of his runes on the previous turn, so we don't know that he doesn't have it. But Litten Lover playing the Kaiser, not accelerating at this turn, knowing that, learning from the previous game where she developed it onto a board and it was immediately removed by Deadbloom Predator, knowing there's already a Deadbloom Predator on the other side, just developing it into her base, keeping it ready to respond to whatever it is that Ali does here. And Sabotage is going to be coming through, knowing that denying as much pressure from Litten Lover is going to be crucial. Seeing a Rebuke there, most likely sideboarded in from Litten Lover. Main deck Rebuke, not always seen in decks like this. So that Rebuke, very, very nasty to see when you're playing a Deadbloom Predator, having to channel those 2 runes just to play it, sorry, exhaust those 2 runes. You definitely don't want to have to do that again, as it already messes with your rune economy. And yes, Rebuke is going to be the one that is discarded for Litten Lover. It is a spell, so it could not be something like the Kaiser. But we do know now that Litten Lover has that Flash, is going to be able to keep these cards safe if she wants to. Could choose to save the Flash for the Kaiser, though again she has a second Kaiser in hand, so how much does she value it? And electing to keep hold of that Flash for now. Traveling Merchant, not something that she wants to expend such a valuable resource on. And Deadbloom Predator will be able to conquer that battlefield, bringing Ali up to 2 versus Litten Lover's 5. Now of course Litten Lover could move up to 6 points next turn, so Ali really feeling forced to use this Captain Misfortune already. Now the benefit of using Misfortune here is that if she moves, it would ready the Deadbloom Predator and would let him pull that Deadbloom Predator back into base, which would keep it safe from the second Kaiser that could trade. But instead choosing to play the Mindsplitter which can remove any card from hand, not just a spell, and that is going to be second Kaiser Survivor being put into the discard pile. And now Little Lover's hand looking very thin with two very important options removed for her. Only got that flash in hand now, which is not going to enable her to take that battlefield. It's going to make it very difficult to push forward here. Now Kaiser could reinforce the Arena's Greatest, but if we're being honest, Little Lover only drew one new card there. We know what she had. She had that flash. And Misfortune Bounty Hunter will be able to give Mindsplitter or Deadbloom Predator ganking, so that other battlefield not likely to remain in her control. So just holding onto the base may be important right now. Pulling that sneaky deckhand back, just making sure that she has options moving into the next turn. Instead, electing to leave the sneaky deckhand there. And Ali now, with a plethora of options, still has that Misfortune Captain in the champion zone, ready to be used at any time. Could just leave the Mindsplitter and the Deadbloom Predator both in this Obelisk of Power, but choosing instead just to move this Deadbloom Predator over, just to ensure that that sneaky deckhand won't survive, that it won't be able to push back with any kind of spell power that could have denied a Misfortune to at least trade 1-for-1. And Ali, still with all of his runes available, as that didn't cost anything for him to do, still with his full range of choices available. And that sneaky deckhand isn't going to be available for Little Lover to push into this next turn. I would view that maybe as a mistake, now only this Kaiser on board. We know that she had a second Kaiser, but it's no longer there. Looking at her hand, it looks like Flash and Sneaky Deckhand are what she has, and those are not very powerful options right now. But Ali electing not to do anything with his runes and just holding them in hand, so the Little Lover has to think about what he might have so that he can respond to anything. Now we know that most likely that is going to be a fight or flight face down on the Mindsplitter's battlefield, and Little Lover sending both Kaisers, having developed a new one accelerated into the base, sending both onto the Obelisk of Power, but one being sent back by that fight or flight, and now it is a 7 might Mindsplitter against this 4 might Kaiser, having to use the flash by Little Lover to pull that Kaiser back. So she does keep both of them alive, but possibly using those resources, knowing that she could pop that fight or flight, knowing that she's ahead on points with those 6, just so that she can push on next turn, maybe finding something like a Darius that would really enable her to push through these meaty units. Still developed in base, but Ali will be able to hold, and that brings them both to 6. And now Ali has a lot of options to reinforce these battlefields. Little Lover needs to take both, and Ali has to be aware that there is a Vi fight or flight combination as always. It looks like Little Lover 1 card in hand will only have 2 now, so Ali, not overly concerned, chooses to just pass with all of his runes available, making Little Lover think, does he have ways to just stall me and deny me from even pushing into these battlefields even more? He didn't play another face down card, but he could have another fight or flight. Even something like a Rebuke, he may have moved one in from his own sideboard. I know that some Misfortunes also play things like Possession, which would be a more niche option, but yes, Little Lover just going to move in this Annie Stubborn. Going to develop that board. Pull out a fight or flight from her discard pile with the Annie Stubborn power, and now she's going to be able to push out one of these battlefields to make sure that she can conquer at least one this turn, which will put both at a 7-7 position. Pushing the Deadbloom Predator back to base, placing a sneaky deckhand from hand that we knew she had onto this now open battlefield, and that will enable her to push both her Kaisers there as well, which will be able to hold against this Dead Bloom and Mindsplitter potential push. But the Fight or Flight indeed coming up from Ali, that's what he saved his runes for. And now Lit and Love are forced to push both Kaisers onto the other battlefield, because without being able to keep and hold that arena's greatest, it does mean that she can't afford to let that Mindsplitter live and perform a ganking action over to that other battlefield, so she has to try and remove it. But Rebuke coming in from Ali, that is Kai'Sa being pushed back into hand, and that, quick as a flash, if you pardon the pun, is gonna be 2-0 to Ali Eldrazi versus... Like and subscribe for more Riftbound.